Welcome to Using Street Art to Engage Teens in Social Emotional Learning. My name is Mandy Noah. I'm the Program Director for Paint Love and a school social worker. This presentation was made in conjunction with Paint Love's Executive Director, Laura Shaw. Before we begin, I wanted to share a bit about Paint Love. We're an Atlanta-based nonprofit agency that partners with Title I schools and community agencies to provide art programming to youth who've experienced poverty and trauma. In the past 6 years, we've served over 10,000 kids. We're also passionate about integrating art into social emotional learning. We've developed curriculums and trainings and are continuing to grow that program so that arts are being used in the hands of educators and professionals working with youth all over the world. Before we begin, I wanted to share a bit about street art and its history. Street art is creating art on exterior surfaces, often seen on walls of buildings and bridges in urban settings. The art form has evolved over the decades from a grassroots project using spray paint to mainstream popularity with various mediums. First thoughts of street art typically wander to graffiti of the 1960s and 70s, but street art reaches as far back as ancient Roman walls where artists scratched celebrations of esteemed gladiators and diatribes about politicians. Though today's street art history is intertwined with graffiti, much debate exists about whether graffiti is considered street art. Graffiti's place in gang culture, originating in the 1920s, along with competitive tagging, caused some to wonder if graffiti's focused audience sets it apart. There is also the issue of vandalism. For the purpose of this conversation, street art, interchangeable with public art, is defined as art on exterior surfaces done with permission by the community. While the origins of modern public art were expensive monuments and structures commissioned by the wealthy and erected in public places to honor religious or political leaders, through its evolution, the roots of street art shifted to rest in social and political commentary and giving voice to those often unheard. In the 20th century, the term evolved to incorporate the growing body of art created to speak for the people or advance social and political movements, like the Mexican and Works Progress Administration murals of the 1930s, or the early community murals of the 1960s and 70s civil rights movements. In the 1980s, Keith Haring used playful, colorful shapes and figures as advocacy for the AIDS movement. Jean-Michel Basquiat used expressive scribble marks to explore Black identity and empowerment. Other artists create bold pieces to draw attention to local community issues, like homelessness. In countries where freedom of speech is limited, street art is a powerful form of expression and solidarity among citizens. Venice, Italy attributes its community revitalization in the 1970s to public art. People of Latino and Hispanic heritage banded together to create murals sharing their stories and reactions to racism. Gang activity dramatically decreased. Recently, street-sized Black Lives Matter paintings respond to racism, along with stirring tributes to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. Murals and outdoor installations of this type exist all over the world. They are a form of activism that spurs the imagination. They are also a marker of the unique people and spaces making up a community. Younger generations pilgrimage to sites of outdoor work to engage with the art. Bringing these images into the classroom and spaces with teens meets them with their interests and provokes relevant conversations the artist is already trying to have through their work. Conversation easily flows from admiring these images or visiting the sites or even participating in the creation of public art. Through guided questions, one can move through the collaborative for academic and social emotional learning, CASTLE's 5 social emotional learning competencies. There's self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. These questions can be replicated with any piece of art. There's value in dissecting art in your community to build community connection. So in preparation, before sharing a piece, briefly research the artist, name and location of the work, or randomly select one in your neighborhood and research together with teenagers. Try selecting artists of diverse backgrounds with diverse styles. This not only promotes diversity in the arts, but by exposure to professional artists who look like them, empowers young people to explore the arts as a viable career choice. Each of these sections have prompts for additional work, so don't be afraid of the need for supplies. Most of the time, if you give coloring tools and paper to young people and say, with a prompt, create a mural, they're happy to create something wonderful. So if you are working virtually with young people or have a very limited budget and limited supplies, just basic colored pencils or markers and paper works perfectly. One piece that we add to CASTLE's competencies is expression. Because we are an art organization, we think that expression and harnessing emotions, so not just learning how to change them, but to harness them for expression is very important. I want to share a quote from Sierra Kaler-Jones from an article in Medium magazine that I think is so important. Healing for Black and Brown young people should be centered in SEL. We must not lose the importance of co-constructing spaces with young people to lean into creative expression and joy. To shift conversations in what Dr. Sean Ginwright calls a healing-centered perspective, where young people are reminded that they are not just their trauma, but rather all of the ways they continue to dream, imagine, hope, and grow. Let them dance, sing, laugh, play, scream, organize, and encourage all the brilliant ways they show up. SEL, devoid of culturally affirming practices and understandings, is not SEL at all. So like I said, in each of these sections, we try to give an opportunity or some inspiration on how to continue expression after these conversations. So first we'll move to self-awareness. Being self-aware means having the ability to identify emotions and their connections to our bodies, thoughts, and behaviors. Self-awareness calls us to recognize our strengths, values, and individual characteristics. Start conversations reflecting on initial reactions to a piece of public art. What is the first thing you notice in this piece? What thoughts come up? What do you feel when you see this? Have you felt this before? How does that emotion feel in your body? Especially for pieces related to racism and oppression, feelings of anger, sadness, and frustration may come up. Be mindful of that. Move toward the behavioral connection. How would it shape your behavior each day if you pass this piece of art on your way to school? How do you think it shapes the community? Challenge teens to begin to recognize how a particular style compares to other styles of street art that the group has seen or explored already. This piece is by Kevin Bongang. It's called ATL Love. Bongang creates colorful, large-scale, pattern doodle-based murals with positive phrases. I've had conversations with teenagers from this piece about what is an affirmation, why are affirmations important, what is an affirmation your community needs to see, what is an affirmation you need to see. And from there, I have them create a piece around affirmations. In this piece, Atlanta-based artist Muhammad Yungay paints images of Black youth and leaders to inspire passerbys. You can compare these styles. How do the different styles make you feel differently? Notice the body language of the characters in the piece. What does that body language tell you? What emotions do you see in these individuals? What makes this piece of art or style unique? Is it calling back to a moment in history? From seeing this one piece of art, how would you describe or define the values and identity of the community? And once you have had that conversation about sort of what snapshot this piece may represent about the community, spend some time researching that community. And maybe that will affirm or debunk some of your guesses. So from this conversation on self-awareness, you can have teenagers create their own street art mural and prompt them to create a piece symbolic of themselves, or maybe symbolic of how they're feeling in this moment. Self-management. Conversations on self-management center around ability to express emotions in a healthy way. When reflecting on initial feelings, ask teenagers to recall a time they felt a specific emotion before. How did you express yourself when you experienced that emotion? Would you consider the expression healthy or unhealthy? When art evokes strong feelings, as we mentioned around racism or oppression, try not to judge or change your emotional reaction, but discuss ways to harness them for expression and change. What emotion or thoughts do you think the artist is trying to express? What is the value of expressing this through art and to anyone passing by? Have you ever tried expressing yourself when you have a big emotion through creating? Maybe building or music, dancing, painting, or filmmaking. Describe that experience and share. Street art often highlights marginalized populations or narratives of overcoming obstacles. Before I continue, I do want to mention that this piece is by Cadex Herrera. He is an artist who created a memorial mural of George Floyd near the site in Minneapolis where he died. So from here, conversations could be had like, what do you notice? What is the benefit of memorializing someone in this way? How would you feel when you passed it? What are your initial thoughts? Notice the people and the letters. He's surrounded by a sunflower. What could that mean? In 1968, a Puerto Rican community in Boston's South End fought displacement from the city during urban development. The nonprofit community development corporation called IBA started an affordable housing community called BIA Victoria that celebrated its 50th year in 2018 with a huge public art project called 50 Portraits of BIA Victoria, where youth from the community created all kinds of art to show the community through their own eyes. The director of the youth program said, "We want to start from within. Instead of focusing on the problems that are out, within the community, within the government, within the system, let's first fix the problems that are within you, and then let that healing spread into the community." Have a conversation with teenagers about the meaning of resiliency. When have you overcome obstacles? Who and what helped you? I always think it's important to have young people name the people in their lives who are their support systems. What is a piece of art? Music, story, dance, design, etc., maybe fashion, that expresses overcoming obstacles or mistakes. How does it inspire you? In whatever preferred style that may be, have teens create a mural or maybe another art piece, sharing their story of overcoming something. Social awareness. Art's ability to encourage empathy means social awareness is a natural reverberation. Explore pieces that respond to situations. In San Francisco's Clarion Alley, artist Megan Wilson painted a beautiful mural of home and casa directly on the streets in response to numerous evictions and demolitions occurring in the area. In Oakland, California, Mike and John Meninetti created dignified images of people who are homeless in the area as a way to humanize their stories. At the 2019 Super Bowl in Atlanta, Georgia, murals were commissioned across the city to address social justice issues, from freedom of speech to immigration to access to education. As mentioned, many artists in 2020 have responded to issues of racism and police brutality with murals. Take this opportunity to have conversations about equality and racism. Explore these murals through the lens of the population represented. Who is the subject of this mural? How is that person or group represented? If there is a human or person represented, what are the emotions and thoughts being displayed? What do you believe this is in response to? How does this mural reflect ideas or a way of life similar or different from your own? Now switch to the perspective of the community. What is the value of having this piece in the community? Has a piece of art ever changed your idea of a group or person? Discuss issues in your community. What's a message you feel your community needs? Maybe it's as simple as a message of hope. Prompt students to create their own mural addressing an issue in their community. And after they're finished, maybe ask where would they place the mural and why? Maybe they know exactly where this needs to be in their community. What would you hope viewers would think or do after seeing it? Relationship skills. Public art establishes a sense of place in a particularly powerful way as it interacts with the environment, the history, and the relationships that exist in a specific place. Creating meaningful relationships and a deeper connection to place is essential to being invested and involved in one's community, argues Robert Fleming, author of Placemakers, public art that tells you where you are. Fleming stresses the importance of filling the, quote, landscape of your mind by imbuing the meaningless space in which we reside with meaning through connections. He says, by populating the mind with images of the community, its history, characters, stages of development, often with a decorative richness, whimsy, and even humor, placemakers help us to restore a feeling of belonging, and with it, perhaps, a sort of inner harmony. Public art uniquely contributes to placemaking and a communal sense of identity and belonging by strengthening relationships to community and individuals. Amy Goodwin said in her book, On the Wall, the true power of murals lies in their local community impact, to see issues that resonate with real people, the oppressed, the poor, the overworked, the underrepresented. The process, the act of community building and collaboration, the beautification that community murals provide, create intangible threads. The process is most powerful when community members are intimately involved with the creation. For instance, in this piece, artist Joel Artista Bergner traveled around the world. He travels around the world to create murals with children in under-resourced villages. This is one of his pieces. They're all involved in the creation of the artwork. In Wilmington, Delaware, as seen here, the mural Getting Back to the World was created together with 100 veterans and their families, talking about rejoining civilian life after serving in the military. On a sheet of paper, prompt teens to write down a favorite family or cultural tradition. Without knowledge of their answers, pair or group teens together and have them share with one another these favorite traditions. Have the group create an art piece that reflects all of their traditions together, making sure that everyone is involved in its creation. And once they're finished and have shared, process the experience. What were your group's strengths and weaknesses? How did you communicate? How did you communicate your message in different ways? How did you create together and meaningfully incorporate everyone's different identities and experiences? If your piece was a large-scale mural in your community, would you feel like the process of working together strengthened your connection to each other and to your community? Responsible decision-making. The ability to make responsible decisions requires forethought and clear thinking. The process of planning and creating art is a unique opportunity for teens to practice making choices in a safe space. Take ownership of their decisions and see how they directly result in specific outcome in the product they create. Street art can also help young people understand how their decisions have an impact beyond themselves in a larger context, not only within the piece of art, but within the community. The understanding and connection to history is an important aspect of decisions within creative placemaking. A community's identity is continually changing. However, so placemaking art needs to incorporate the history and past of community as well as adapt for the future. Art is empowering to young people and lets them know that their voice matters and their actions can shape the future of the community. A community leader within the nonprofit YAYA, Young Aspirations, Young Artists in New Orleans, speaks to the unique capacity of art to give a voice to youth who may otherwise be silenced by their age, skin color, background, and serve as a tool to allow youth to connect to their history and their neighborhood and feel like valued members of the community. They have a voice, says the director, as youth, as members of a community, and they can use art as a tool to be heard in their homes, in their community, amongst their peers. They can use art to move what they see in their community or what they see lacking in their community forward. Have teens work in small groups to plan and design a multi-panel mural that represents the past, present, and future of their community. This can also be done individually, so having young people represent their past, present, and future through a mural. But for the community piece, they can define community however they want. Their neighborhood, their school, city, the classroom, etc. Afterwards, process with how did you define your community? What is a point of pride from your community's history? And again, this can be individualized. So what is a point of pride from your own history? How did you choose to showcase that? In what ways do you see this aspect of history drawing a direct line to a place, to a part of your community today? What is something you want to see in your community's future? Think of 3 direct actions you can take in your daily life to create the building blocks to bring about that change in the future. Brainstorm ways you can encourage others in your community to make decisions, to take actions that will positively impact the future of the community. For a follow-up activity, you can have teens create a persuasive campaign poster to educate others about one of their ideas. Raquel Lanieri writes, public art lifts up humanity and challenges the individual who encounters it to think differently about the world. The composition of art elements, the movement of colors and shapes and shadows, stir both the internal and external world. Bringing art into social emotional learning adds the element of expression, a pivotal practice for teenagers. And using public art trains a new generation to engage in conversations with their community and selves in new ways. Thank you for joining us today. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or more resources you want more resources on integrating art and social emotional learning, visit us at www.gopaintlove.org. You can also follow us on social media at PaintLove. Thank you.